Tell me where you were and what it was like the day that King was killed.
This may be the first time I've really talked about that night. I was living there on Darlington Avenue in Charleston, and I just quietly went in my house and I sat down in a little recreation area and I turned the radio on and I listened. I just sat there the rest of the night. The sun came up with me sitting there. I remember when I first met King, it was when there were some differences of opinion on what we should be doing. A lot of people don't realize that when King went to jail for the first time in 1960, he had been preaching disobeying unjust laws. A schism had developed in the civil rights community over the whole issue of whether or not King was practicing what he was preaching. He came to meet with us. We sat down with him that night, I guess at 9:30, 10 o'clock in the dormitory room. When I walked out of the room, it was 4 o'clock the next morning. That was the most memorable, the most transformational period of time I ever had. It was almost like a Saul to Paul transformation in me. But the February date that I think about most often is February 1, 1960. That was the day those 4 black students at North Carolina A&T decided to sit in at a lunch counter to protest. If they wanted to eat a hamburger or a hot dog, they would be trespassing to sit down at the lunch counter. About 2 weeks after that, I, along with some students at South Carolina State, attempted to sit in down in the S.H. Crest down in Orangeburg. Of course, they took all the tops of the stools off. That was not going to be
nowhere to sit?
It was not going to be comfortable to sit on those poles. John Lewis and I first met October 1960 when we were formalizing what became known as the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, better known as SNCC. And here you are, serving in the United States Congress with John Lewis and yours truly. How does that make you feel?
You know, I talk about it often. When we grew up in school, we studied civil rights. And of course, I went to Morehouse, which is a school very deep in civil rights history. And John Lewis was a big name.
My dear friends, your vote is precious, almost sacred. It is the most powerful nonviolent tool we have to create a more perfect union.
It still feels funny to refer to John Lewis as John, or to call you Jim, because I grew up saying, but for them, there would be no me. Because we find ourselves fighting the same fight you all won. So whether we're talking about segregation and the fact that our schools now are just as segregated as they were then, or the fact that we're fighting to pass a Voting Rights Act now that you all fought for and we passed in 1965, the fact that history is repeating itself so closely is very disturbing, but it reminds me that we've never fought a fight that we haven't won.